What's up everyone? Today we're going to be designing and building the neck for my new Headless model. This is Trevin with Days Custom Guitars. Let's check it out. Alright, so in last episode you saw me design the body shape that we are going to do for the new Headless design. But today we're going to be making the neck. The neck process is pretty much similar with all of my builds. The only difference is today we get to try and figure out what we want to do for a headstock design. Or just what we're going to do for the area above the nut. Most headless guitars don't have anything, and they normally have a strap or something along the line so you can still hold it. However, I was doing some thinking and decided that I'm going to try and come up with an idea to where the headstock will have at least something to where you could still hang it in just a typical guitar hanger. I guess it's not going to be technically the standard with these headless designs that you see. However, I'm kind of excited to try something a little different and just to make it a little bit easier to store. That was something I read in an article that someone didn't like about them, is that they just can't hang on a standard guitar hanger. So let's see what we can do to make that a little bit easier to do. So for this build I decided to go with this piece of roasted maple bird's eye. It's got actually a lot of cool things about it. It's got some bird's eye, which you can see there. There's a little bit of this almost figuring as well. A little bit of flame to it. So figured woods are really cool. There's a long detailed process that someone else could explain to you of why this happens. However, I just know it looks great. So what you haven't seen is I took this kind of more rough shaped timber and jointed it to make it flat, and then planed it to thickness, and then squared up a couple sides, which makes our process of routing the truss rod channel much easier, and you'll see that in a second here. But I have kind of a vision in mind for this build, and I had this piece laying around, and I thought this would just be a really good complement to the way the guitar is going to look, at least that I have in my mind. We'll find out. So one thing I like to do is to really make sure that my neck blank is flat. I've already, kind of checked this out, but more or less, this is a nice machined surface on this table saw, and I've got it to where, you almost can feel a suction that happens when wood is really joint flatly. Like when you go to lift it up, there's almost this air that gets stuck under it. So we don't want this to be warped at all. Unfortunately, I've had some necks that have twisted after I machined them, and I've learned the hard way after completely making them that they're just not usable. In fact, let me show you what I'm talking about. So this neck was something that I was really excited about. It was the first time using what's called tigerwood, and it's got these really awesome patterns. It's a very hard wood, and it unfortunately wasn't as dry as it should have been when I started machining it, and that's my fault for not taking care of it and really monitoring that. So anyway, after I went ahead and carved it and let it sit, this thing started going crazy crooked. You can see the difference between the neck and the fretboard here. So this neck shape is what we're starting off with there, and it's hard to tell, but let's see if I can get it on the camera. But there's a really bad twist to the wood, enough to where you would never be able to get these frets level and flat, so it would just create nothing but problems when it came time to actually setting this guitar up. This is an example of what can happen if you don't let the wood settle enough. And unfortunately there are some times where wood just moves. You get these really cool figure patterns in wood, but that also gives you the risk of having it twist when it gets tension released after carving away material. It's just one of those things that wood does. It has an attitude, and sometimes it doesn't work with you. So back to talking about our neck blank being flat. When I set this down, it is flat as can be. To give you an example of how it should not be, that's a lot of twist, and that's not what you want. So that's just to reiterate the importance of starting off with a completely flat neck blank. So, as mentioned before, one of the most important parts in these builds is getting our center line established. this neck blank is right at 3 inches, so I know that right at 1.5 inches, we can go ahead and mark here, mark here. Then it's just kind of a matter of connecting the dots here. The next step is to fix this to the table with some double-sided tape. This stuff's pretty cool. I use this a lot. I just got this stuff on eBay, however, in a pinch, it is totally acceptable to stick 2 pieces of masking tape together with some super glue. I've used that quite a bit. But believe it or not, this stuff actually works out pretty good. I think the hardest part is just simply grabbing the backing of it and separating it from it. But I have my fence kind of fixed in a position. I know that this is square. You can see our center line, all is good there. So I'm going to rest this up against it, and you'll see why here in a second. So what is a truss rod? Well, this wood is going to be under a lot of tension. I don't remember exactly the numbers of how much a standard scale, standard tuned guitar pulls, but I think it's over 100 pounds or something like that. And correct me if I'm wrong. Either way, that's going to pull the neck away as the strings are really pulling against it. And so there's going to be some things that need to be adjusted, and we do that by inserting this truss rod. This particular kind is a double action, so if you turn the wheel, you can see there it actually starts to bend this section up. If you turn it the other direction, it bends it away. This action counteracts the wood moving with the string tension. So we need to make sure that this is nice and centered, and that way, when it's all put together, we'll be able to adjust for the action. We need to put on our template to make sure that everything is where it's supposed to be. And that's what we're going to be doing here. So I'm going to be using this table saw fence as a guide for my router base. And let's see if I can see, but I'm lined up right on center, and you can't really see the line, but trust me, it's been enough time to try and make sure it's perfect. So now that I've got the table saw fence set, then I'm going to go ahead and just take shallow passes with this router bit, and I'll measure the depth of the truss rod to make sure it is right where it needs to go. The trick with a router is to make sure you don't take too much material off at once. It'll tear, it'll rip, it'll run away from you, all things you don't want. So we're taking really shallow passes, probably somewhere around 1/16 of an inch or so. And I've got kind of a basic measurement of how deep to go. I'll have to go a little bit more than this. This is 0.36 inches. So just to kind of keep myself on track, I'll go ahead and make an adjustment here, or measurement here, just so I know not to go past that point. The rest of this is just a matter of routing, and that part you don't want to listen to. So we'll put on some music instead. Towards the end, I had to remove a little more material. Just the way this truss rod is designed, this is slightly deeper than the rest of the channel, so that's why there's a section that's slightly deeper and a little bit wider. But what's important is that this thing fits nice and flush, and this is where it needs to be, and we are good to go to the next step. So I went ahead and took my template and traced around it just a little bit more. In fact, I used a pin this go around. The pencil's kind of hard to see sometimes with this roasted maple, but we're gonna go ahead and take it to the bandsaw and just rough cut this outline, and then we'll go ahead and use the flush trim template router bit for this. Okay, so now we're kind of at the designing part. So this is just what I cut out. I had made a kind of a cheap template the other day, trying to just cut up some ideas with that leftover plywood from the original video. As mentioned before, a lot of headless guitars are just, they stop like that, and then they have like a little loop. I'm sure that's kind of the standard, that's the norm, people are used to that. But I thought it'd be cool to have some sort of design to where you can still take your headless and put it in your hooks. So I didn't really do anything too exciting. I do believe that this will go good with the shape, and then my thought was to just use a D right here for my logo. We'll see. It's kind of one of those you have to see it together with the whole template to really get an idea. In fact, let me do that for you. I feel like the horns go good with that shape. It's kind of one of those we're just going to have to put it together and see how it looks, but in the concept I think it's going to look really good. Okay, so my battery just died on my nice camera, but we've got our neck, everything's routed out nice and smooth, and we've got our truss rod channel routed. That's feeling good too. So now we'll go ahead and choose a fretboard, and we'll get that thing glued on. We'll do that for the next video, so we will catch you then. Later.